Okay, so now we're going to factor trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. But in this case, our leading coefficient isn't going to be 1 this time. So this technique is just a little bit more difficult than what we have learned the last couple of days. Okay, so whenever I was in school, I learned to factor by trial and error, and it was awful. And so I really don't even teach trial and error anymore. I really just go to the method that works. If it's factorable, it works every time. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. Instead of doing things the way that the title of the page reads, I'm going to go ahead and do it the way that I really do prefer to teach this. Alright, so take a look at this. We've got 3x squared plus 17x plus 10. And I've been saying all along that we want to take our leading coefficient and we're going to multiply it times the constant term, and we're going to write it off to the side. Now we're going to write down all the different pairs of factors of 30. So we've got 1 and 30, negative 1, negative 30, 2 and 15, negative 2, negative 15, 3 and 10, negative 3, negative 10, 4 won't go in, 5 will, 5 and 6, negative 5, negative 6. Okay, so now we want the only pair that will add up to be positive 17, and that is this pair right here. All the rest of them do not add up to be 17x, or 17. So here's what you do next. I'm going to erase this. Alright, so what we want to do now, you're going to rewrite the first term. You are going to split up the middle term into these two numbers right here, 2 and 15. So we're going to write 2x and 15x. And by the way, it really does not matter the order that you write those in. I'll show you here in just a second. I'll do the problem again and show you that it doesn't matter. Okay. And then this came from right here. The 10 came from, I just brought it straight down. The only thing we changed was we turned the middle term into these numbers that we found over here on the left. Or, I'm sorry, on the right. Okay, so now this looks like a factoring by grouping problem. So I'm going to underline the first two terms and I'm going to underline the last two terms. Now the first set of underline, what do they have in common that I can factor out? I can factor out an x. 3 and 2 don't have anything in common but 1, so that really all I can factor out here is x. So what times x would give you 3x squared? 3x. What times x would give you 2x plus 2? If this right here is a plus, you bring down a plus. If that's a minus, you bring down a minus. Now what do 15x and 10 have in common that you can factor out? They have a 5. What times 5 would give you 15x? 3x. What times 5 would give you 10? Plus 2. Now this has to match this. If it does not, then you've either done your math wrong or it's not factorable. So now we're going to factor out 3x plus 2 from both of those. So that got rid of that, and what are you left with? X plus 5. And so now that's completely factored. Now, let me show you. Remember how before I told you that it does not matter which order you write the middle term in, right here. So instead, I'm going to write it 3x squared plus 15x plus 2x plus 10. So I just rewrote it, but I swapped the middle terms. So I'm still going to factor by grouping. I'm going to factor out of 3x squared and 15x, I'm going to factor out of 3x. What times 3x would give you 3x squared? X. What times 3x would give you 15x plus 5? If this is a plus, you bring down a plus. If it's a minus, you bring down a minus. What did 2x and 10 have in common? They have a 2 in common. 2 times what will give you 2x? X. 2 times what will give you 10? Alright, now this has to match this in order for you to be able to factor that out. So I'm going to factor out an x plus 5 And what I'm left with is 3x plus 2. Now notice, this and this are the same answer. They're just written in a different order. And with the commutative property, we are allowed to multiply in any order. So these are exactly the same answer. All right, so let's take a look at this problem. So again, we are going to take our leading coefficient and multiply it times our last term or our constant term, and don't forget the minus sign. So 2 times negative 9 is negative 18. Now I want to look for factors of negative 18 that add up to be negative 3. So I've got 1 and negative 18, those add up to be negative 17. Negative 1, positive 18, those add up to be positive 17. 2 and negative 9, that adds up to be negative 7. Negative 2, positive 9 adds up to be positive 7. 3 and negative 6 adds up to be negative 3. So I'm thinking it's going to be this one, just making sure though. And negative 3, positive 6, those add up to be positive 3. So I know it's going to be what I just circled. So I'm going to rewrite the first term as 2x squared. Didn't change it, just rewrote it. I'm going to change negative 3x into positive 3x and negative 6x. And I got that from these numbers right here. And then I'm just going to rewrite minus 9. Now I'm going to underline the first two terms, underline the last two terms. The first two terms I can factor out an x. So what times x would give you 2x squared? 2x. What times x would give you 3x? Plus 3. This is a minus, so I'm going to bring down a minus. What do these guys have in common? They have a 3 in common. What times negative 3 would give you a negative 6x? 2x. What times negative 3 would give you a negative 9? Positive 3. Now this has to match this exactly, and it does. So I'm going to factor out my 2x plus 3, and what am I left with? X minus 3. Alright, so now we're going to look at 6x squared minus 19x plus 8. Very first thing that you should always do is look to see if there's anything that they have in common that you can factor out. And I don't really see anything, but that really should be your first thought. Your first thought should be, do they have anything in common? And these guys don't, because 19 is prime, but I'm still going to do like I've done before. 6 times 8. 48. I want factors of 48 that add up to be negative 19. So let's write down all the factors of 48. 1 and 48. Negative 1, negative 48. 2 and 24. Negative 2, negative 24. 3 and 16. Negative 3, negative 16. 4 and 12. Negative 4, negative 12. 5 won't go in. 6 and 8, negative 6, negative 8. There's only one of these pairs that adds up to be negative 19, and that is this pair right here. Those guys add up to be negative 19. So now, I'm going to do just like I did before. I'm going to rewrite my first term. The middle term gets written into these two coefficients, so negative 3x minus 16x, and then the 8 gets written like that. Underline the first two, underline the last two. So I'm going to factor out a 3x here. 3x times 2x will give you 6x squared. 3x times a negative 1 will give you negative 3x. I'm going to bring down this minus sign. And I've got 2x minus 1 there. Look at that. Those guys match. That's good. So now I'm going to factor out 2x minus 1 and 3x minus 8 is what I'm left with. And this is done. Okay, so you might want to take some notes here. This is just kind of going over what we've already learned, but it's just kind of written out for you. So you might want to hit pause. Alright, so just like we've done, I'm going to take my leading coefficient, multiply it times my constant term, and I'm going to write it off to the side. Now I'm going to write down all the pairs of factors of 30. Alright, that's all the pairs of factors. So there's only one of these that adds up to be positive 13, and that is this pair right here. So again, same thing. I am going to write my first term down. My middle term becomes 3x plus 10x, and my constant term is going to stay 15. Underline the first two terms, underline the last two terms. What can I factor out of 2x squared plus 3x? I can factor out an x. X times what will give you 2x squared? 2x. X times what will give you 3x plus 3. This is a plus, so I'm going to bring down a plus. These two things have a 5 in common. What times 5 will give you 10x? 2x. What times 5 will give you 15? Plus 3. This matches this, so I can factor out 2x plus 3, and I'm left with x plus 5. And that's it. This is factored. Alright, so let's take a look at this problem. Alright, so the first thing you need to do is you need to ask yourself, do they have anything in common that we could factor out first? And just off the top of my head, I know 8 won't work, 4 won't work either, so it's going to have to be 2. And then I can also get at least an x out of all of these. So what times 2x would give me 18x cubed? Well, that is 9x squared. What times 2x would give me 70x squared plus 35x. What times 2x will give me a minus 8x? Minus 4. Alright, so now this 2x right here is just going to follow us along till the end. So what we want to do next is we want to multiply 9 times that. So I get negative 36. So I want all the factors of negative 36 that add up to be positive 35. There's only one of them, so you've got your choice of 1 and negative 36 or negative 1 positive 36. I could write down the others, but there's actually only one pair, and I know that I found the one that adds up to be 35, so I'm not going to go ahead and write the rest of these down, but I know it's going to be this one right here. So again, this 2x sits out front, it just hangs out. 9x squared, I'm just rewriting. 35x will turn into minus x plus 36x. And that negative 4 I got from right here. So now I'm going to factor what's inside the parenthesis by grouping. Again, this is just coming along for the ride. What can I factor out of 9x squared and x? I can factor out an x. X times what will give you 9x squared? 9x. X times what will give you a negative x? Minus 1. That's a plus, so I brought down a plus. What do these guys have in common? They have a 4 in common. 4 times what will give you 36x? 9x. 4 times what will give you a negative 4? Minus 1. Now, this matches this, so that's good. Again, annoying thing hanging out at the front. And now I've got 9x, oops, that looks terrible. 9x minus 1, and what's left is x plus 4. There we go. It's completely factored. All right, so that's it for this lesson. If you have any problems, let me know.